He bought her a diamond necklace with the money meant to keep my mother alive. That's when I decided, one of us wasn't making it out of this clean. People like Derek always think the world bends for them. Money softens their lies, polishes their guilt, hides their rot. For months, I called him my friend. Trusted him with more than I should have. He smiled like he cared when I told him about Mom's treatment. He said, "Don't worry, Eli, I'll take care of it." And he did. Just not the way I expected. When I saw the photo of him sliding that necklace around Lena's neck, her smile brighter than the diamonds, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt quiet. Empty. Like something inside me had finally snapped loose. That's when I stopped hoping for help, and started planning my revenge. My name's Eli. 23, mechanical engineering student, part-time barista, part-time delivery driver, and full-time son trying to keep his mother alive. Mom's been sick for 3 years now, kidney failure. Dialysis 3 times a week, hospital bills that look like ransom notes. I used to think hard work could fix everything. That if I just kept moving, just kept grinding, life would give me a break. It didn't. It just kept asking for more. Still, I wasn't alone back then. I had Lena. Lena wasn't rich either, but she had this warmth that made the cold days tolerable. She'd bring her sketchbook to the cafe where I worked the night shift, sitting in the corner booth until I clocked out. Sometimes, when the crowd thinned, she'd sneak behind the counter and whisper, "You missed a spot, Mr. Overachiever," before kissing the corner of my mouth. We didn't have much, shared ramen, thrift store dates, promises about the future, but it felt like enough. Then there was Derek. Derek came from money, his dad owned half the buildings near campus. He was one of those golden boys everyone liked, not because he earned it, but because he made it look effortless. We'd met in freshman year. He was charming, generous in that way people are when generosity costs them nothing. When he found out about Mom's illness, he was the first to offer help. "Man, don't stress about the bills," he said one night, sliding into a cafe chair beside me. "My dad's medical trust covers charity cases all the time. I'll talk to him. We'll get your mom the treatment she needs." I remember staring at him, unsure. "You'd really do that?" He grinned. "Of course. What are friends for?" It felt like the first bit of luck I'd had in years. Over the next few weeks, things started to brighten. Lena would help me fill out forms. Derek said he'd handle the transfer through his father's hospital network. He even called it a fast-track donation, his words making it sound official. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Life began to feel lighter. The air didn't taste like fear anymore. There were small moments that made those days bearable. The 3 of us laughing in the library when Lena accidentally spilled coffee on Derek's designer bag, Derek joking that he'd charge her interest. She laughed it off, embarrassed, and I thought nothing of it. At night, Lena and I would stay up studying in my tiny apartment, the sound of the dialysis machine humming through the walls like a heartbeat. She'd lie with her head on my shoulder, tracing imaginary futures with her finger across my arm. Someday, she'd say softly, "You'll finish school, get that job, and we'll move Mom into a real house. No more machines, no more late bills." Someday, I'd echo, pretending I didn't notice the tired look in her eyes when she said it. When Derek texted me a week later saying the transfer was confirmed, it felt like salvation. The exact amount, $22,000, had been sent from his father's medical trust. I remember that night so clearly. Mom smiled for the first time in months when I told her. She squeezed my hand and said, "You've done enough, Eli. I'm proud of you." Lena cried when she heard. "Happy tears," she said. "See? Things do turn around," she whispered. For the first time, I let myself believe her. The hospital scheduled Mom's surgery for the following week. Everything felt fragile but hopeful, like walking on glass that somehow held your weight. I started to think maybe Derek was proof that not all rich people were heartless. Maybe kindness really did exist outside the struggle. If only I'd known what that kindness would cost me. Because the moment I started trusting him completely, was the moment I signed everything away. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days before Mom's surgery. I was on my delivery shift when my phone buzzed. The hospital's number flashed across the screen. For a moment, my stomach dropped. I thought maybe something had happened to her. "Mr. Hayes?" the woman on the line asked. "We're calling about your mother's payment confirmation." "Yeah," I said, setting the pizza boxes on the back seat. "It should have gone through." "Derek, my friend, said the transfer was made last week." There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long to feel normal. "We've checked with the accounts department. No transfer has been received under your mother's case ID. If you could contact your donor, please do so as soon as possible." My mouth went dry. "But, you're sure?" "Yes, sir. Without the payment, the surgery can't proceed as scheduled." Her tone was polite, practiced, but it felt like a hammer to my chest. I called Derek right after. Straight to voicemail. I texted. "Eli, hey, the hospital said the transfer hasn't shown up. Can you check with your dad's trust?" Derek, scene 3:47 p.m. No reply. Hours passed. I delivered another 5 orders, barely remembering the addresses. Every red light felt like a test in patience. When I finally got home, Lena was waiting by the door. She looked worried until she saw my face. Then her expression softened into something else, guilt, maybe. "What's wrong?" she asked. I told her about the call. About Derek not answering. She bit her lip. "Maybe it's just bank delays. You know how those things go." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Probably nothing." But my stomach didn't believe me. The next few days were a blur of excuses. Derek finally texted back. "Derek, hey man, yeah, all good. Just some verification stuff. It'll show up soon." His casual tone irritated me. Verification stuff? For 22 grand meant for a medical emergency. I called him again, no answer. When I told Lena, she shrugged, looking down at her phone. "He's probably busy. His dad's got that new project, right?" "Yeah, maybe." Still, something in her voice, it was distracted, distant. I brushed it off, blaming my paranoia. I'd been running on fumes for months, maybe I was just too tired to think straight. But then she started canceling on me. First, it was small things, study nights, coffee breaks. Then entire weekends. "Family stuff," she'd say. "My mom's not feeling great." Except, when I stopped by her dorm one night to drop off the dinner I'd made, her roommate said she wasn't there. "She left about an hour ago," the girl said. "Said she was meeting a friend." I didn't ask who. I didn't want to sound jealous. I trusted her. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the tone in Derek's texts, the hospital's call, Lena's half-hearted reassurances. It all started feeling wrong. A week later, the hospital called again. Same woman. Same polite tone. "Mr. Hayes, we still haven't received the payment. We'll have to postpone the procedure." Postpone. That word crushed whatever hope I had left. Mom's condition wasn't stable enough to wait. I drove to Derek's place the next morning. The gated mansion loomed like a fortress of everything I wasn't. The guard recognized me from before. Derek had thrown a few parties I'd attended, feeling out of place the whole time. He let me in. Derek greeted me with that same lazy smile, wearing gym clothes and holding a protein shake. "Eli, bro. What's up?" I wanted to punch him right then. "What's up? You tell me. The hospital still hasn't gotten the money." He frowned, like I'd just mentioned a minor inconvenience. Oh, that. Yeah, my dad's finance team said there was some issue verifying the recipient. It's all bureaucratic stuff, man. Don't worry. Derek, my mom's surgery got postponed. He looked uncomfortable for a second, then shrugged. I'll check again. Relax, okay? It'll sort itself out. Sort itself out. I snapped. She doesn't have time. His voice hardened. Hey, I said I'd take care of it. Don't make this a thing, alright? Something about the way he said it, the irritation, the lack of urgency, made me feel small. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. 2 nights later, I saw something I couldn't explain. I was delivering downtown when I noticed a familiar car parked near Lena's dorm, a black BMW with the same custom plates Derek always bragged about. I froze. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was visiting someone else. But then I saw her. Lena stepped out of the dorm in a dress I hadn't seen before, dark blue, shimmering under the streetlight. She was smiling, her hair done differently. She walked right to the passenger side of the BMW, opened the door, and got in. The car pulled away. I stood there for a long time, pretending the world hadn't just shifted under my feet. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing. Lena, sorry, baby. Can't talk tonight. Family stuff again. Love you. Red heart. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My heart said there had to be an explanation. My brain said I already knew it. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because a part of me, maybe the last good part, wanted to believe she wouldn't do that. That they wouldn't do that. Days passed. Derek stopped responding completely. Lena grew quieter, her words clipped, her smiles mechanical. I started feeling like an outsider in my own life. At the cafe, customers' voices blurred into white noise. At home, the dialysis machine's hum felt louder than ever. Then one evening, while helping Mom change her dressings, she said, "That girlfriend of yours, she's sweet. I hope she's helping you through all this." I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Mom squeezed my hand. "Don't lose hope, Eli. You've done everything right." I wanted to believe that too. But the next morning, I got a call from the hospital's billing office. The woman's tone was different this time, sharper. "Mr. Hayes, after reviewing your mother's case, we discovered the funds were transferred, but not into our account." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean, not your account?" "The payment was rerouted through a private account before reaching us. The trail leads to a man named Derek Lorne. Does that name mean anything to you?" For a moment, everything went silent. Derek Lorne. The air left my lungs. I couldn't think. Couldn't move. I muttered something, "Thank you," or maybe nothing at all, and hung up. When I checked my phone again, I had 2 new notifications. One was from Lena's social feed. A photo. Her, in that same blue dress. Smiling. A diamond necklace glinting against her collarbone. Derek beside her, his arm around her waist. The caption read, "To new beginnings." I stared at it until my hands stopped shaking. Then I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, cracked, and slid to the floor. The dialysis machine hummed in the background, steady and mechanical, like it didn't care what had just happened. That was the night something inside me began to change, slowly, quietly. Like ice forming over water. And I knew one thing for certain. If Derek had taken the money meant to save my mother, then I was going to take something from him he'd never replace. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes I saw the photo again, Lena in that dress, Derek's hand on her waist, the necklace catching the light. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a work event, anything. By morning I'd convinced myself I needed to see Derek face to face. He opened the door half smiling, half annoyed, like I'd interrupted his breakfast instead of his betrayal. "Eli, hey. You look rough, man. Is everything okay?" I pushed past him. "We need to talk." He raised his hands. "Whoa, calm down. What's this about?" "You know damn well what it's about. The hospital said the transfer never went through. And the trail leads to your account." Derek blinked, the picture of innocence. "That's ridiculous. Must be a bank error. I'll have my accountant fix it." "A bank error?" My voice cracked. $22,000 vanished, and you're telling me it's a clerical mistake? He shrugged. "It happens. You don't understand how complicated transfers are. Relax." That word again, relax. He said it the way people do when they already know you can't. "Where's Lena?" I asked. He hesitated for a beat too long. "I don't keep track of your girlfriend, man." But his eyes gave him away. That half-second flicker of guilt, small, but enough. I walked out before I did something that would have landed me in handcuffs. The air outside felt thin, like it was rejecting me. That night, my phone kept buzzing with notifications. I didn't want to look, but curiosity is cruel, it always wins. There they were again. Dozens of tagged photos, all in one place, a luxury resort 2 hours away. Derek at the pool, sunglasses and champagne. Lena beside him, laughing, that necklace sparkling against her skin. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself." My fingers went numb. I didn't throw the phone this time. I just stared until my reflection blurred into theirs on the screen. The next day, Mom's condition worsened. The doctor said her blood pressure was unstable, that the delay in treatment wasn't helping. I stood by her bed, holding her hand while machines whispered numbers I didn't understand. She smiled weakly. "Don't look so worried, sweetheart. I'll be fine." But her eyes were glassy, distant. When I stepped outside her room, I leaned against the hallway wall and stayed there until the lights dimmed for visiting hours. The sterile smell of disinfectant stung my throat. I felt everything and nothing at once. At home, I tore through drawers looking for the old paperwork Derek had given me, the so-called transfer forms. His neat signature stared back at me, taunting. I crumpled them in my fists until the paper softened like fabric. The apartment was silent except for the soft tick of the clock. I realized I hadn't eaten all day. The world had become soundless and slow. Days blurred. Derek stopped answering completely. Lena disappeared from my messages. Then one evening, my phone buzzed, a message from her. "I didn't mean for this to happen, he can give me a future you can't." That was it. No apology. No shame. Just a quiet confession of preference. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. Mom passed 2 weeks later. The doctors said they did everything they could, but I knew the truth, what killed her wasn't illness alone. It was time stolen by greed. At the funeral, I stood under the gray sky, hands buried in my pockets. Rain soaked through my jacket, but I didn't move. People offered condolences that dissolved before reaching me. Every voice was a blur. When the crowd left, I stayed. The earth around her grave was still fresh, dark, and heavy. I crouched down and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it coming." The wind didn't answer. After that day, I stopped pretending to be the person I used to be. I sold my bike, quit one of my jobs, and started spending nights in the library, not studying but reading about financial law, digital transfers, data trails, everything Derek thought I'd never understand. Grief is strange. It burns you out, then rebuilds you into something colder, sharper. Each night I told myself I'd just learn enough to prove he stole the money. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't about proof anymore. It was about balance. They'd taken my mother's last chance, my faith, my heart, all the things that made me human. So I let humanity go. And in its place, something else began to grow. They took everything that kept me human. So I stopped being human. I told myself I wasn't a criminal. I told myself I only wanted the truth. Truth, I convinced myself, was a tidy thing, evidence, receipts, a paper trail. But grief is a blurring force. It makes tidy things ugly and precise things savage. After Mom died, truth became a weapon I was willing to sharpen. I began with what I already had, anger and a stubborn brain. I spent nights in the library not because of exams but because of filings, public corporate records, charity disclosures, property transfers. I read them the way I used to read textbooks, hungry for patterns. Derek's family name appeared in more places than it should: shell companies, shadow partnerships, nonprofits with vague missions. There were gaps you could see if you looked, little empty boxes where money had gone in but not clearly out. I couldn't make anything happen with hope alone. So I learned the language of his world. I learned how to read a ledger like it was a biography. I learned which charities listed real donors and which were facades for private accounts. I learned how wealthy people hid things in plain sight, philanthropy with a side of laundering, sponsorships that looped money back into private pockets. I read legal papers until the legalese felt like a skin I could slip into. It wasn't glamorous. Mostly it was long, dumb, lonely work, requests for records, public document searches. Nights at the terminals with cheap coffee that tasted like metal. But the more I dug, the more the map of Derek's life unfolded: luxury properties listed under company names, construction contracts that were overbilled by obscene margins, small non-profits that existed only on paper. None of it, on its own, proved the transfer that had stolen Mom's surgery. But pieces fit together. Threads that, when pulled, promised to unravel something. I needed access. Derek lived on a private stage, his inner circle never invited outsiders. So I created one. Her name was Mara, Derek's assistant. Young, efficient, exhausted by the constant high-gloss choreography of the Lorne household. She was the kind of person who could be invisible to the rich and indispensable to their schedules. I watched her enough to see how she moved: polite, professional, never quite herself. I learned from her posts that she used to study at the same university I did. That was the door I used. I approached her like a ghost from a life she once knew. One rainy evening, I waited near a campus coffee shop and nearly apologized to the universe for the person I'd become. When she walked out, umbrella in hand, I followed at a distance until I cued my old, safer voice. "Hey, Mara. From the Comp Sci lab. Eli Hayes. You remember me?" She blinked, recognition slow. "Eli. Wow. You look," she faltered, then smiled out of politeness. We talked for 10 minutes. I told her a softer version of the truth: how my life had fallen apart, how I was scraping the edges just to get by. I left out the stalking part. I left out how I'd watched her get into Derek's car. I made myself small and honest, a struggling student who'd loved the wrong people. People like to help broken things. Maybe that's why she agreed, over time, to coffee again. She never asked pointed questions about Derek. She never offered loyalty. But she shared small things: how the office ran late nights before a board meeting, how cash flow reports were handed off in envelopes sometimes, how certain donations arrived on the same days luxury purchases were billed. She once laughed, tired and brittle, and said, "They can afford anything except the courage to be transparent." She didn't know what she'd given me by speaking that sentence. I never asked her to betray Derek. I simply let her be heard. Her own disillusionment was a key I didn't have to force. At the same time, I sharpened other tools, less heroic, more practical. I had done technical work in school. Nothing fancy, A year of network security classes, a job patching campus servers, enough to know where to look and what to avoid. I used that background the way a locksmith uses a file, not to smash the door, but to pick it quietly. I didn't talk about code or servers with Mara. I didn't need to. I used my nights to compile timelines, cross-reference donations with purchases, and archive everything. Copies of invoices, screenshots of social posts, phone metadata, pieces that made a mosaic of motive and opportunity. I arranged small tests first. Not to hurt anyone, just to see how the system behaved. I would watch a transfer status, wait, and see how an accounting office responded. I would file a public inquiry about a nonprofit and watch which of their contacts suddenly became active. It was a game of cause and effect. Most of the time nothing exploded. Most of the time all I found were doors that stayed shut. Close calls came like stones thrown at a window, sharp and startling. Once, late in the night, a security alert pinged on one of the public databases I was watching. An IP had traced activity the wrong way, toward an address I recognized from my own apartment. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would show on the logs. I spent an hour cleaning up the traces I could and then sat in the dark, realizing how quickly a life can be undone by curiosity. I learned to move slower, quieter, like someone tiptoeing across a roof at midnight. Other close calls were human. A temp at the hospital's billing office, an overworked kid, remarked offhandedly about donor redirects in a public forum I was monitoring. I messaged him, calm and professional, pretending to be a legal intern. He replied, then panicked and vanished the next day. The trail went cold. It taught me that people are brittle, push too hard and they break away instead of toward you. I collected allies in unlikely forms. There's a certain breed of journalist who smells corruption like blood in water. I found one, Leah, tenacious, late 20s, caffeine in her smile. I didn't walk into her office waving accusations. I gave her the pattern I'd been stitching, filings, dates, odd transfers. She asked the right skeptical questions and promised discretion. If you're right, this is big, she said. If you're wrong, it'll ruin a lot of people, including you. I told her I knew that. I told her I wanted only what was true. Between Mara's small confessions, Leah's nose for a story, and my patchwork of documents, a plan assembled itself, not a heist or a violent trap, but an unmaking carried out across paperwork and public shame. We would expose in ways the boardrooms couldn't just sweep under rugs. We would show the pattern of transactions that tied Derek to private accounts, to shell companies, to luxury purchases. The aim wasn't just to make him pay back money, though that would be a cold comfort, but to remove the comfortable illusion that his name immunized him. I practiced being cold. Grief makes a factory of resolve. I learned to set emotions aside and read, to turn fury into method. There were nights when the room felt like it had too many windows and the wind kept bringing in voices, Mom's voice telling me to forgive, Mom's voice telling me to hold on. I'd go to her grave and talk to the earth like it was a council. I'll fix this, I'd say. I'll make them see. I promised her small things. I promised to stop wearing the same jacket to interviews. I promised to get her a headstone that wouldn't lean. Promises are cheap. Keeping them is where the cost shows. I kept walking away from people who wanted to make me soft again. I let friendships fray. I let Lena's memory calcify into a clarity that allowed no mercy. The plan had stages. First, corroborate the redirected transfer with independent records. Second, attach it to Derek, publicly or privately, through an undeniable chain. Third, force the institutions involved to respond. Fourth, let journalists and regulators do what they do best, amplify and litigate. We practiced timing. Leah wanted a slow burn, data, corroboration, then publication timed with a regulator's hearing. I wanted blood now. The compromise was surgical, time the leaks so they hit when Derek's board meeting aligned with public filings. Make humiliation public. Make it unignorable. There were tools I refused to use. I never blackmailed. I never forged. I refused to become what I hated. Not because of ethics papered over grief, I simply knew that if I crossed certain lines, my name would be lost to whatever justice I sought. So instead of making things up, I turned over stones already there and forced others to look. As the weeks turned to months, the threads knotted tighter. Mara gave me an internal memo with a timestamp slip she'd found accidentally in a shredder bin. Leah dug up contractors who testified to odd payments. My own log showed a transfer pattern that matched dates when Derek celebrated, new cars, vacations, the posts with Lena. The triangulation was ugly and undeniable. The close calls didn't stop. Once, on a rainy Tuesday, a man in a dark suit asked questions at the cafe where I used to work. He knew my name. I told him I was busy and poured a latte with hands that didn't shake. I felt his eyes like a threat. The message was clear: someone was watching the edges of my life. That night I slept next to my mother's grave, figuratively. I sat on the bench until dawn and listened to the city wake up. I felt the plan like a living thing under my ribs, hungry, patient. I promised the dead to be patient too. There was no glory in an impulsive strike. The best revenge, I decided, wasn't the flash of a ruined face, it was the long, slow unraveling that left no comfortable lie to hide behind. Finally, after months of patient work, the map was complete. I had timestamps, memos, corroborating witness statements, and a chain of transactions that led, bluntly and publicly, from Derek's account to a private ledger he'd thought invisible. I had allies who could turn dry filings into headlines. I had a journalist who knew how to push for audits. I had an exhausted assistant who would, if pressed, remember the nights when envelopes changed hands. Standing at the edge of action felt like standing on the lip of a rooftop, looking down. The air smelled like rain and possibility. I felt both the human that had loved a wife and mother and the thing I'd become, cold, narrowed, focused. I thought of the dialysis machine's hum and how small and mechanical everything had felt in Mom's last hours. I wasn't naive. Laws existed for a reason. People like Derek had expensive lawyers and networks that could strangle a whisper. But I had built a net of proof. Not a perfect net, nothing is perfect, but enough. The night before we moved, I visited her grave. The sky was a bruise. I knelt and smoothed the dirt with my hands. Tomorrow, I said, voice low. Tomorrow I will make it count. I stood, dirt on my palms, and for the first time since the photo with the necklace, I felt ready. Evidence at my side. Timing set. Allies ready to pull threads. The desperate boy who'd begged for mercy was gone. In his place stood someone who had learned to weaponize truth. Everything was in place. The morning the world found out felt like sunrise after a long, leaden night. I woke to my phone vibrating through the sheets and never stopped moving. It started slow, anonymized filings posted to a watchdog forum, a spreadsheet leaked to a few inboxes, a small blog picking up a pattern. Then Leah did what she does best. She took the pattern, threaded it with witness statements and time-stamped memos, and wrote the kind of article that makes people look up from their brunch and change their plans. Headlines bloomed within hours. Lorne holdings under scrutiny. Charity funds diverted to private accounts. Investor confidence shaken. The boardroom calm they'd cultivated shattered into the kind of noise you could hear from a mile away. I watched it all unfold in the cheap diner 2 blocks from the cemetery, coffee gone cold in front of me. The TV over the counter rolled through the same clips I'd fed Leah, redacted documents, a blurred screenshot of a ledger, a quoted excerpt of an email Mara had found. They called it an investigation. It was a fire. And the more it burned, the faster the oxygen left their rooms. Phones rang. Regulators opened files. A small team of police and financial crimes officers appeared at a Lorne subsidiary office before noon. Investors started calling their brokers. The stock ticker for one of Derek's companies slid into a tailspin. Press conferences were scheduled and then postponed. Derek's name was spoken in tones I'd never heard before, curiosity edged with accusation. Leah texted me a single line, "It's live. Are you ready?" I was. I had been ready for months. Ready for the cameras. Ready for the suits. Ready for the humiliation that could not be polished. We didn't need to invent anything. We only had to present what was there, one clean thread that connected a redirected donation to private accounts, to invoices that paid for new jets and refurbishments of properties listed under shell company names. We had Mara's memo, Leah's corroboration, and my logs. When paired with the video we released that afternoon, it became unbearable. The video was concise. Grainy footage of a private party, a voice caught on a live microphone. A man laughing about charity money and saying, "We can always reroute a little, no one checks the small stuff. It's a game." It wasn't cinematic. It was ugly. But it put a face and a tone to the ledger. It put Derek at a table talking about numbers like they were toys. Within hours, the clip had 1 million views. Board members issued statements. Derek called his father and his father did what rich men with reputations do, he denied, then distanced, then disowned. There's a cruelty in wealthy families that's almost performative. Public distancing is a ritual. Private disavowal is swift. Derek's father's lawyer sent a terse statement, the family was unaware of any irregularities and condemned any misuse of charitable funds. Derek's face on the morning news was pale and small. He tried to run. I watched him attempt the only thing he thought could save him, escape. But the world had slowed in ways that didn't favor him. Accounts were frozen. Security teams that owed favors called in legal counsel that wouldn't bend. The bank that held his personal account complied with a court order. His credit cards declined at the airport kiosk. His passport was flagged. He walked into a private terminal like a man whose runway had been shortened to one step. Lena called me 3 times that day. She left a voicemail that I listened to once and deleted. Her messages later were frantic, pleading, "Small, Eli, please. I didn't, call me. Please." They read like a confession halfway written and not yet sent. The sound of her voice, small and terrified, stung more than any image of Derek's humiliation. But I had made choices. So had she. By late afternoon, television vans lined the boulevard outside Lorne Holdings. Cameras tilted up the glass facade as Derek's lawyers shuffled through statements. Men in suits that had been fat with money looked like skeletons in tailored fabric. His empire's PR team read a script, then improvised apologies. The kind that try to sound sincere but land like ornaments being dusted off. The board convened an emergency meeting. The email servers lit up with subpoenas and investor inquiries. The company's market value bled. I watched the whole thing happen from a corner across the street, a coffee in one hand and a camera in the other, watching my own name in the margins of the feed Leah and I had orchestrated. There was a tightness in my chest like a fist. Satisfaction sat beside a weight that never left. When Derek finally emerged, his face was a portrait of a man who had been taught to never look embarrassed in public. He faltered that day. Reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs popped. Someone shoved a microphone. He tried to speak with the practiced ease of a person who had always been able to buy calm. It didn't take. "Derek Lorne, did you redirect charitable funds?" a reporter shouted. He stammered. There's an ongoing investigation. My legal team," his voice trailed into a defense he could not buy. They escorted him toward a black car. A man shoved a camera in his face. "Why did you take that money?" It was a question that was cut to the bone, because it named the thing that had killed my mother, the casual calculus that put convenience and pleasure above human life. He saw me then, across the throng, under a billboard that had once advertised a new Lorne development. His eyes locked on mine for a second that felt like a year. I walked toward him slowly. The crowd seemed to part like water. He tried to smile. It fell flat. Up close he looked smaller than he ever had, lined, hollow-eyed, with the pale look of someone counting the cost of everything and finding his currency had evaporated. There were people around him, lawyers, PR, police, but for a breath it was only him and me. Why? I asked, voice low and steady, the kind that doesn't need to shout because the world is listening anyway. He looked away. Then back. You don't understand, he began, but his words were thin. I didn't let him finish. I didn't need to. I had gathered patience like a weapon and now it was time for its edge. I reached into my pocket and pressed play on the clip Leah had prepared. The same grainy footage, the same laugh, the same sentence, charity money from a poor kid. It played through the speakers of a reporter's boom mic and the sound ricocheted off glass and steel. For a moment Derek's lips moved as if forming words I'd already hardwired. Listen, I said, keeping my eyes on him. You bought her with the money that would have kept my mother alive. Now you know what desperation can do. He made a sound then, like a man who had been unmasked and found suddenly very young. His shoulders dropped. He slumped as if someone had let the ropes go. The polished suit couldn't hold the shape of him anymore. For a second, he looked like an animal caught and realizing it cannot negotiate. The lawyer's hands hovered for a second, unsure where to place themselves. He didn't argue. He couldn't. The accounts, the video, the memos, everything closed in, and the shine that had always protected him was stripped. His father's phone calls were recorded and leaked by someone who had lost patience. Investors pulled credit lines. Board members resigned mid-sentence. Derek's name became an adjective to be whispered at cocktail parties, compromised. He fell apart in front of me. Not theatrically. Quietly. There were no tears at first. Only the slow dismantling of a man who realized that the ledger of his life would be counted in consequences. He tried to bargain, promises to repay, to cooperate, to explain, but no one, least of all me, believed in the currency of his contrition anymore. I turned away when people started to point. I left him there, collapsing into the procedural arms of an institutional machine he thought would always serve him. I walked past camera crews and inquiring stares, past the neat lines of reporters chasing sound bites. The city felt strange under my feet, lighter, somehow, as if something heavy had finally been lifted, then replaced by something else I could not yet name. He called my name once, a thin, desperate sound. I kept walking. They had taken everything that kept me human. So I stopped being human long enough to make sure their comfortable life could not continue in ignorance. The rest was aftermath. Lawyers, settlements, hearings. But none of that mattered in the way the image of Derek at the curb did. He had been reduced to a man who had misread his own invincibility. I walked away and let the cameras record his ruin. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt almost artificial. No more breaking headlines. No late-night calls from Leah. No anonymous messages on encrypted boards. The world had chewed up Derek Lorne's name and spat it into the endless scroll of yesterday's outrage. And me? I just disappeared back into the noise. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. I wasn't anything anyone would write about. I went back to classes part-time, worked nights at the same coffee shop I'd once studied in, and rented a room small enough to remind me what space really costs. People passed me on the street and never looked twice. That's the thing about revenge, it doesn't make you larger than life. It makes you small again. Ordinary. But free. One evening, when the air turned sharp with the season change, I drove out to the cemetery. The ground had settled by then, grass just beginning to grow back over the dirt. I brought a small box with me, plain, nothing fancy. Inside was the necklace, the same one that had once glimmered against Lena's throat, bought with my mother's stolen breath. I didn't know why I'd kept it this long. Maybe as proof that it had all been real. Maybe because I needed to decide what to do with it when everything was over. The sunset hit the stones at an angle that turned everything gold. I knelt, brushed the leaves away from her name, and set the necklace down so the diamonds caught the last light of the day. For a moment, they almost looked pure again. "I did it, Mom," I said quietly. "It's done." There was no voice from the wind, no cinematic sign, no closure that felt holy. Just stillness. And maybe that was enough. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, watching the light fade until the stones turned cold. Then I turned to leave. As I reached the gate, I glanced back one last time. The necklace rested where I'd left it, small, bright, and meaningless. "He bought her love with my mother's life," I murmured. "I bought my peace with his ruin." And for the first time in a long while, the air around me didn't feel heavy. It just felt quiet.